We are good to go. Okay, so I guess my first question, as always, is just how did you get into the symbolic world? How did you get into Jonathan's work? What's been kind of like your journey through all of this?
Well, I went to a very familiar pipeline of uh, of having a meaning crisis. It all starts there with a meaning crisis, and then searching, and then encountering Jordan Peterson, and then from Jordan Peterson, meeting the work of Jonathan, and then from there, I just kept looking into more towards orthodoxy, other Orthodox YouTubers and speakers, and then from there, I I tried to discover more of the Christian faith. Right? Um, but certainly, a big step was getting the language of creation book and diving into it a little bit, um, and that was a big factor in all of this.
Yeah, no, The Language of Creation, great book. For anybody that hasn't gotten the book yet, highly recommend. It's a great read. And it's one you can read over and over again and still pick up something new pretty much every time. So,
Yes.
well, speaking of that, like what's sort of the first thing that was like your big, mind blowing moment? I don't know if you've had one of those.
Many,
Okay.
yes. uh, I guess the 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 just having the big picture, just seeing the big picture of it all, or at least as far as I can see,
Hmm.
um, and just noticing what Pageau is trying to do, which is trying to show that reality itself is symbolic. Like symbols are not just something that you create and put on an image on a paper or whatever, but that your life is symbolic. I
Yeah.
think realizing that was like, whoa, now a lot of things start to make sense. And everything starts with the way that the symbolic world and the language of creation explain the relationship between heaven and earth. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Uh, so having that foundation from there, things start falling in their place, and as you keep living your life and noticing things, you're like, okay, I see the patterns, and I see how this makes sense of like pretty much everything at the large scale.
Yeah, exactly. I think what you touched on at the beginning, that realizing that like your perception of things, even that is symbolic. And if things aren't like patterned or, pointing to something, you're not even gonna have that capacity to perceive it. So that was one of my big like, oh wow, that's pretty interesting. I need to think about that a lot more. But just yeah, I guess with you, it's a pretty interesting situation because you're making art, and I feel like as people in the symbolic world, when you try to make art, you try to like incorporate some of that into your art because clearly you see the meaning in it. But I've watched a couple of Pageau's videos on that, and he often speaks about not trying to be explicit with it, not trying to just think of symbol and cram it in the story. So like in your films, like how do you sort of go about having a symbolic element, but also not trying to force it too hard?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one, and that's something that I'm still trying to figure out how to approach that. It's interesting that you bring that up because that's one of the things that I always remember about Jonathan explaining in the symbolic world is that what he's doing, it's ideally in an ideal world we shouldn't be doing that.
Hmm.
Like what he's doing is like this meta commentary on life. And he's just explaining, okay, this is the things about life that we kind of like ignore or miss. But ideally, we should just be living in it, not having to create this meta commentary. But we find ourselves in this very peculiar moment in history in which we our vision of the world, is so flat, and then somehow doing this meta commentary can help us. I mean, I guess the goal is not to stay at the level of discussion, but to at the level of embodiment of like actually living those things out. But that to me is still something I'm trying to figure out. Um, and when it comes to art, I mean, I'm doing films, right? That's what I do. I'm terrible at drawing. I tried drawing. I tried painting. My mom is a painter. I tried those things. I'm not so great at them, so I'm sticking with creating things and putting them in front of a camera. But part of the process is that you have, everything starts, at least for me as also a screenwriter, it starts with a blank paper, right? And so you sit down there, you have a bunch of ideas floating in your head, and uh, you one of the things, because I'm aware of this, is that I am perhaps hyper aware of the symbolism as I'm writing it. And so I'm writing the scene and I'm thinking, well, what does this scene mean at these different levels? And then I start thinking about the elements that could point to order versus chaos or this or that. And it's hard. It's still, and honestly, I just haven't figured it out. What I try to do is try to write something that I feel that is genuine. That's something that it's intuitive for me to write, and then as I write it, then I think about what I'm writing, because it's also important to. I think it's also important to have the correct elements in their place as you write a story, because you also don't want to write something that I feel that it is improper, that and so figuring that out, that tension between living and embodying uh, what an author is as it writes the story, and being the critic who analyzes and who sees the symbolism in the story. That's a tension that I have, and I still don't haven't figured out how to deal with it, but I'm working it out.
Nice. Well, I think we're all kind of working out that, and it's going to be probably a lifelong process. But if you could describe like a little bit, what do you do now before you're making a movie? Like where does it start? And if you could just walk us through kind of for the ones you've done so far, how's it been?
I started really doing screenwriting because, and I thought I was gonna stay at that level, just doing screenwriter. But I figured out that considering the the state of the film industry and just the ambience that you find within the film world, I figured that I had to start uh, producing the stories myself and trying to put them on camera, instead of just trying to find somebody and relegating the story to somebody else. And so the process of doing the film, it always starts with the idea, then the blank page. Um, but it has, I guess it has changed a little bit from when I started back in, I would say, 2015. Uh, 2016 is when I was in that shift of going. I mean, I was already in a crisis in 2015, um, but 2016 was that moment where things began to shift. That's where I encountered the work of Jonathan and Jordan Peters. And I guess that it just, the part that changed the most is me looking back at my drafts. Like I write a draft of the story, not even a screenplay. I just write a draft. And now I look at it with a, when I look at it back, I do it with a different lens than before. Before, I would write and I wouldn't care too much. Like it just came out. That's it. Take it. And in a certain way, that's good. You're expressing something that's very genuine, very intuitive. It comes from the heart. And so it's not, I don't know if it's great to analyze your story so much, but it is certainly an effect of what we have been doing with the symbolic world movement and all that. But I have found it beneficial because at the end of the day, I find that I have clarity of my own stories that I didn't have before. You know, like sometimes I would write something, and if you asked me, like, what does it mean, or you know, what is the point of this, I'd be like, ah, you know, I just found it cool or whatever. While now I can write something in the same way, very intuitive writing, and then look back at it, and then I can think, okay, this is why this came out of my mind or whatever it came out from, and I can look at it, and that would kind of like describe something about where I am in life, or the things or the conflicts that I have, or the things that I'm analyzing. You know, it's kind of like interpreting a dream. You know, like your brain shoots all these elements to create a story. When you're dreaming, you wake up and now you analyze those dreams. But with writing, you can get rid of the elements that you feel that you don't want in your story. That's the difference. You can edit your dreams.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention sort of being able to give meaning and to see the meaning in your stories, because I had a question about this, but just for like art more broadly. So when you create something, right, do you think that there is the meaning of, the author, the artist, and do you think that the meaning of whoever will interpret your art in their specific circumstances is sort of like as valid or as true as the intended meaning? If that makes sense. I don't know if you kind of see the kind of dilemma I'm trying
I
to pose
see.
here.
I see. Yes. That makes me think of these memes that I've been seeing. I don't know. I mean, they're probably based on a true story. I don't know if they are, but of these old grandma, right? She finds a picture of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and she hangs it, and she probably uses it during prayer or whatever. She thinks it's Jesus, right? It's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Um, hey, and I think this is, I mean, I cannot speak as if this is like dogma of the church or whatever. This is just what I think so far. Uh, as long as she uses it and she sees Jesus in the image, I think that's where the worship goes. It doesn't go to Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so clearly, there's a big difference there between the intention of the artist who created that picture of Obi-Wan Kenobi and then the person perceiving the art and using it. Uh, so with that in mind, I I do think that both um, the person interacting with the art and the artist can uh, use the art and view it and interact with it in different matters, and both of them have certain legitimacy within their own context. I don't know if that helps.
No, that was I think that was a good answer. That's kind of what I was intuiting as well. So to change gears a little bit, but not too far away. I wanted to talk about some patterns. Actually, speaking of patterns, that I've seen in some of your films, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So there's one that I've kind of the best way I could describe it is like the mysterious figure, I guess. I think that's I forget the name of the one where it's like in medieval times where the person meets sort of like the shadow person at the
Yeah, Into
crossroads.
the Rising.
Yeah, and then there's the other one where it's like during the robbery and he keeps seeing the person again and again. I feel like there's that theme of just that mysterious figure haunting
Yeah.
the protagonist. Why that specific motif in a way?
Uh, I don't know. I want to know that too. But that's what I was telling you about the part that is intuitive. I mean, the only way I can think of it is as a dream. So a lot of my so far I've been working in short films, And maybe you have noticed this, maybe you haven't. But the way that I perceive my own short films is that they're kind of like built like dreams, kind of like a dream is built. So there is this layer that it's not completely realistic. There's something surreal about it. So there's something that is kind of like out of place, but it's there in the story. And one of the things that I end up writing about very often it's that mysterious figure. Now, I would say that that mysterious figure uh, has has been informed by uh, what Jonathan, excuse me, by what Jordan Peterson has called, the unknown. You know, and how do we confront the unknown, and what do we do when we see the unknown, and the way that it can be paralyzing, right? And then how we should respond to that paralyzing force of the unknown, or whether we paralyze or not. So I think that shadowy figure plays that role certainly in the short films that I have. Yeah.
Nice. And if I guess one of the things I was thinking is also sort of that role of the adversary and linking it, to orthodoxy. I wanted to know if there was maybe a connection there. Like, have you ever thought about that, or is that just something that I'm reading into the film?
Yes. Well, into the rising specifically,
Hmm.
uh, I wrote it uh, at a time where it's not like it was too long ago, but it was at a time where I was very deeply reconnecting and looking into the Christian tradition. And I saw the connection between uh, death, the unknown, darkness, and sleep, right? And if you've been uh, reading the language of creation, maybe I'm completely misrepresenting this, but maybe you see the connection between those things. And I wanted to show that death as being the same thing as sleep, as falling asleep. So when you fall asleep, you kind of die. You die for the day, and then the next day you wake up again, and it's a sort of resurrection. It's a foretaste of the full resurrection. And so you're supposed to get up and be grateful that you have another day. You know, but I mean, what happened other than night, the darkness, and that you went to sleep and yet you disconnected, so you died. So you have to be happy that you were able to see the light and wake up again. You know, so that's kind of what I was putting out into the rising, where spoiler alert, you have these two stories of the of a kid and of a medieval character who's they both set out to play, which is to act and to go into a small adventure or whatever, and then they encounter uh, this darkness, right? Which again is analogous to the night and to the sleepiness, and the boy ends up falling asleep, and uh, this medieval character dies, and it's the same thing. It's essentially the same thing, and so the hook is in the way that I answer that. What happens next after you fall asleep? you know and so that's where I introduced the character of the father, and so you get the idea. It's kind of obvious, but yeah, that's what I was trying to put out into the rising. I feel that it is the core of Christianity. It is the core of Christianity, that cycle. you know it's in the cosmos, it's in the sun. It's the reason why we pray to the east, waiting for the sun, waiting for the resurrection. And at the end of the day, the last enemy is death. So that disconnection, that is kind of like the last enemy, right? So it's very primordial. Perhaps that's why it appears a lot in mature films, because it's just very basic. It's very fundamental.
okay, this is cool. It's my first time having the artist break down the work, because now that you mentioned the connection between sleep, death, the unknown, now I thinking back and I can clearly see it. So that was
Yeah.
very interesting. Also wanted to ask for the gambit. What is the strategy?
Oh, it's something so smart that I don't know it myself.
Okay,
It
that's
has to be a very genius move.
yeah. That's what I figured. I figured he probably doesn't even know what the strategy is, but yeah, that was I was
Right.
watching and I was waiting for the strategy and then it didn't come. That's kind of like oh well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't. I have a friend that is a really good chess player. I am not him, and I couldn't get him to help me on the script in that moment. He usually helps me. He was very busy, so I was like, "Yeah, well, the point is that there is a master move. I don't know what it is, but there is."
But I think with that one, what I found especially interesting was the connection you made with sacrifice of the chess game, and then the father and the story of like sacrifice in life more broadly. Um,
Yeah.
that was interesting. And I also wanted to ask you why the black and white.
Um, it goes along with the dualistic theme. Now, to be honest, it wasn't the original idea, but considering production restraints, we did this with pocket money. We figured that it was the best way to go, and I found it that it was fitting. It was dualistic, just like a chess. You know, you got the white pieces and the black pieces, and you had the father on one side and the son on another side. And I felt that just having black and white just kind of emphasized that dualism of being on opposite sides.
Yeah, that's nice. Speaking of like equipment, really quickly, yeah, what kind of equipment do you usually use? Like, what kind of how does your production setup look like?
So the Into the Rising, the medieval one, I I shot that with my smartphone.
Oh,
It
nice.
was like a Galaxy. What did I have at that time? It was like a Galaxy 7 or something like that. It wasn't like a super great phone for that either. But that was more because I wanted to participate in a certain competition that was coming up, and I found out about it, and I was like, I have to do it. I have to do something. And so I just grabbed my phone and I shot that in Puerto Rico. That's where I'm from. And I called a friend who had a very beautiful piece of land, and it was mostly me and two or three friends who teamed up and made it happen. And honestly, that's how most of my projects have gone. You know, have been made. Uh, just me and friends, and just making it happen. And I think that we live in a very good time for that. Like years back, you couldn't film so easily.
Hmm.
You needed money, yes or yes. Uh, Now you can grab your phone and you can shoot something. So it's a great opportunity, especially if you want to distance yourself from the people that are the ones giving money, but that will put certain constraints on your
Hmm.
work or whatever. So it's freeing.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that a little bit before, like how you didn't like the state of like the film world slash industry. Like, what's been your experience dealing with that? Like, I've never really tried to pitch a film to anybody, so not sure how the industry, how dire the situation is.
Yeah. Well, it's especially dire if you're if you have Christian values, especially dire. I mean, there's it's always been like that, but I feel that now it's even more difficult. With the rise of what we know about cancel culture and that kind of stuff. Which I'm not like completely opposed to every element that has been brought on with the whole cancel culture thing, because I mean I do believe that there can be harm uh, in art. You can make harmful content. I do believe in that, and I do believe that certain constraints have to be made. It just happened that many of the constraints have been put in place with an anti-Christian bias. So you are gonna confront that bias very often, and especially when there's a lot of money involved. So I mean, there's right now uh, there's Christian companies, there's different you got the Daily Wire trying to build something artistic that is of good quality, and they're investing money in it. But there's nothing more freeing than being self-funded. Even if you're funding, it's almost nothing. There's something freeing about that. Of course, uh, on my side, I am very open to working with people of any background or any ideology, unless it's something you know too extreme. But I am pretty open, pretty tolerant when it comes to that kind of thing. But we have to make art, or it has to be a project that I feel comfortable with, So considering those things, um, you will find that in the art world in general, it leans more towards certain values that are going to clash with you if you are Christian. That's just how it is. And you have to find a way of dealing with it. Simple as that.
Yeah, and why do you think that manifests itself, specifically in the art world? Like I kind of see what you mean, just more broadly in general. So I guess it could just also be like it's happening everywhere, so it also happens in art. But I feel like with art in particular, something special is happening. And why do you think that is?
Um, Jordan Peterson has said something, and that I makes a lot of sense to me. Is that for the people that create art have a certain creative disposition that makes them liberal minded. Now, by that I don't mean liberal in the political sense, or the cultural social sense, whatever. Just in the sense that you're more open to stuff, you know. And I am like that. I am very open to stuff. That's what allows you to be creative. That's what allows you to have all these stories playing around in your head. You have to, when you're writing characters, if you want to write a good character, you have to put yourself in their boots. You have to disagree with the character sometimes, but you have to understand the character, where the character is coming from. So when you think about those things, then you can understand why the mind of somebody who is creative tends to lean towards a very open liberal mindset. Uh, so that sometimes overlaps with the cultural and political things that are happening in the world, and I guess that's just what's happening in the art world in general. People are just going to find those things more tempting and more agreeable. You know,
Yeah, so basically making that connection between, I think you're talking about like the trait, like in the big five personality scale, that the trait
yeah,
openness, and
trade
yeah,
openness.
yeah, I think that makes sense from a psychological point of view. That would make sense to me.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and that
Um,
has that has that has a I mean, I guess that has a spiritual dimension to it as well. The ability of creating these things that are like, think about instruments, think about music. You know, there's something I relate music with the things that are very malleable. You know, and so again, that hashes out with openness and with creativity and all that kind of stuff. And that is why there's also a danger, with those things. That's the blessing and the curse of those elements, is that they they're not these very super order thing, even though there is an order to all of this. But it's more about playing with the blocks rather than just putting them in a very strict fashion, And that playing can allow us to put all sorts of great new innovative ideas out there. But new and innovative ideas can be very dangerous.
Yeah, this I think this makes me think about in the language of creation. He, I hope I'm getting this right. If not, I'm so sorry. But I'm pretty sure he links music and play with the more cyclical aspects that he also associates with like time. So when you understand that like space and time, like the square and then time is like the circle around it, I think you're really speaking to what you're talking about now, where if you have too much of that, eventually the time that constrains the space that constrains the time is going to start to get eroded, and you're going to have like a breakdown of the structure, the order, etc. So you can see the symbolic application of I guess what you're discussing here. So
Right.
great book, Language of Creation. People get the book. It's really good.
Yeah. I have to read it again. I haven't read it in
Oh
months.
yeah, it's definitely one you read every couple of months, at least once a year. It's definitely one of those books. Um, so I guess you wanted to talk about the dilemma of art in the modern world. Is that sort of what you were hinting to, or was there more to like the dilemma of art?
I mean, that's certainly part of it. Something that I noticed as I was learning uh, with the symbolic world, um, was uh, was learning to look at the patterns, learning to see them, encountering them. So I'm gonna give you this example. I find that a really good example is architecture. You know, again, architecture is art, and we can the shift that you see in architecture is a shift that you see everywhere. Okay, so I'm gonna go with something very basic. I like using this example because this was one of the things that blew my mind a lot. Um, the problem is not only the fact that architects are making very ugly buildings now, right?
That is
You have
certainly
to
a
think,
big part of the problem. They are making very ugly buildings.
yes, but you have to think about why they're making big ugly buildings. Well, they're making very big and ugly buildings because there is something very active ideologically about being subversive, about rejecting the tradition. It's just actively. It's while in the past, not saying that every movement that happened in the past was like welcome. There's nuance to this, but in the past, what you see is that uh, all of the art movements, which also included architecture, um, were more like building upon what they had in the past. It wasn't like an active rejection, like hating the past, or hating the tradition. It was building upon the wisdom of the past, right? I mean, that's what's handy about tradition, is that people have figured out certain things already, and you can build upon that, and you can keep figuring out making things better and better and better, and whatever. But I, what I perceive is that in the world in general, and this is what we notice in the art world and in architecture, that there is an active hatred of the past, right? So there is an impulse of simply rejecting the past and creating new things. The problem is that because they're rejecting everything, right? I'm not opposed to creating new things, but when you reject everything, then you just throw a lot of great things out, and now you have like ugly garbage cans for buildings. And it's like, but why? There's nothing that you find that is embracing or beautiful about those things. But it is necessary in order to go against things that were actually beautiful and that were actually warm and that would actually like embrace you as an organic, being, not a freaking robot. Um, but and so that same thing it's a reflection of what's happening in art. Now, something what blew my mind, what actually blew my mind, was that so I've been living in Florida for a little while. I've been back and forth between Puerto Rico and Florida and elsewhere. And going back to my island, um, our we have some old cities, right? And the oldest is not that old. It's not like we're talking medieval or anything else. We're talking about obviously when the post Christopher Columbus, that kind of stuff. But it was impressive to walk around and start seeing that these people were living the symbolic world. They were living in it fully. And I would stand in the middle of a plaza and see the fountain and see that they have these sculptures of these watery monsters, at the edge of the fountain, and then they will have the pillar at the top like a cross or a man with a cross or whatever. He's like, oh, there it is, there it is. The order, the chaotic waters, and the order pillar. And that was at the center of a plaza, so it kind of like indicating the basis of the city. Now, something else that really caught my attention was the fact that every single of the traditional towns, we have what we call 68 municipalities, 68 towns. Every single one, the center of the town, and this is how it is in all of traditional European towns and whatever, is that the center of the town is the church. In our case, the Catholic Church, and then everything else was built around it. You know, and at the center of when you go into the church, the core, the heart of the church, you have the altar, Christ, and that's kind of like everything flows from there. And so you have all this structure that goes throughout the entire, not just the buildings, but how the city was planned and how people lived in that city. And it all happened in a very organic way. I imagine it wasn't like a super like, oh, I mean, obviously they have rules and all that, but it just must have been natural for them to build a city that way. I mean, the most important thing is what? The church, is going to church, is worshiping Christ. And then from there, the other things flow out. Okay. So to me, that is a similar, you can extrapolate that pattern into the art world, same as you can do in any other like industry of the kind. And you will follow that the big most iconic works of art were Christian art, you know and then you had other stuff as well. So now what has happened is that a lot of the Christian art is bad. And the good art is like what they would call secular or whatever. And so uh, that was like you know maybe you had to do something about it. And so when Jonathan made the video about call to Christian artists, I was like, oh yeah, you and so that was a big wake up moment for me. And you might think it's kind of unrelated, seeing as how a city is built and thinking about how you make a script or whatever. But to me, it's kind of like almost the same.
Yeah, no, if you see the pattern, and how it flows from the center onwards to the periphery, and how there's like the hierarchy, and that can sort of guide you through your creative process. I can see the link that you could be making there.
Right. So so an interesting aspect of this is that I don't want to go to I don't want to like go down the rabbit hole too much in this in this video. So I'm thinking about how I'm gonna like say this without going too deep down the rabbit hole. But you can start seeing uh, how changes in the cities affected the way that people lived in them. You know, and then the first competition to the Catholic Church was that in every one of the cities that I just mentioned, they would put a, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, but I'm just going to say it. They would put a Freemason lodge right in front of
Oh,
the church,
interesting.
right in front of the church, and um, and it was kind of to compete with the church, you know. Uh, there's this legend. I don't even know if it's true or not about two very famous American pharmacies, and that the legend is that the people had they were related. The owners of the pharmacy are related, so they will build one pharmacy, and the other owner will build a pharmacy right next to it to compete with it, and they will do that all across the country. That I don't even know if that's true. But what was happening was something similar. It's like, oh, there's a church we need to like right in front of it with like a Freemason lodge, and we are at the core of the city, and that's like that the subversion is it's we're doing subversion here. We're changing what the core is. Um, and then there's other things. There's just a bunch of like the market change, the businesses change through a long process. It wasn't that long actually, but and now what you would find is that most people don't go to church, and the town center, the down what you call the downtown, many of them are like empty. They're like ghost towns. The entire structure of how people live change, right? And that transports into other things, into how they view life in general. And so a similar, and so that was part of a movement. So what I'm trying to say is that what happened in art was something that was happening in conjunction with all of these other things that I'm explaining. It was like an overall massive overhaul of how the masses and people should interact with the world and all that. So, what was my conclusion? My conclusion is like, look, this is way too many things to deal with, right? But there's one thing that we can do is like going back to the core, right? Instead of dealing, it's like you're fighting an octopus. You have to go right for the head, and so I guess what I'm trying to say is that uh, the dilemma that we find in art with the fact that art is now subversive. It for a lot of people, not for everybody, but there is this subversive trend in art and in architecture in the world. How do we deal with it? Well, it's a very basic and easy and fundamental way of saying how to deal with it. And Jonathan has said it: go to church. Like go back to the core, go back to the basic thing, and then the rest will fall into place as you do that.
Yeah, I was thinking to something Jonathan said before about the center versus the periphery, or like the center versus the margin, and how for the margin to have its identity as the margin, there has to be a center against which it is like the margin. And so when you're talking about subversion in art, for the subversion in art to be meaningful, because I believe there is probably a place for some type of subversion in art, but for the subversion to be meaningful, it has to be subversion against sort of an establishment, right? And it's kind
Yeah,
of like playing the role of that fool that's poking at the establishment to make sure it doesn't get too rigid. But if the
Right.
subversion becomes the establishment, then what, what do you do at that point? Because it then starts to
Right.
lose itself, its own identity, because there's nothing really that it subverts itself against anymore.
Right. Which is, yeah, I guess this is why we are. I guess this is why we're doing this video and why we're doing all this kind of stuff. We are in a very strange time in which it's not the first time that has happened, but we are in a very strange time in which um, Christians and what and the like are like the subversion. You know, like I have a friend who told me like, look, keep doing what you're doing. Eventually, this is in the future. This is gonna be like avant-garde. You know, doing something as basic as telling a normal medieval story of about good guy saving a princess and killing a bad guy. That's gonna be avant-garde. You know, that's gonna that's gonna be like, whoa, how dare you like write that? Like look at the Mario movie. Now, I haven't seen it yet, to be fair. But in the Mario movie, they just couldn't have the princess be kidnapped by Bowser. You know, they couldn't. They had to kidnap Luigi, right? I mean, it's not like it's a big deal, but it's just funny because in like that's like the trope of the games is that uh Peach is always a damsel in distress. It's always kidnapped. It's kind of like a joke, but they couldn't do it. It's like no, give Princess Peach a motorcycle and a sword. She cannot be a damsel in distress. Like you just cannot do it. If you do that, now you're being like edgy. That's edgy. That's so edgy, and that's so weird to think about. It's like, how is that the edgy thing? You know, the edgy thing is supposed to be preaching with the sword and the motorcycle, but that's not the case anymore. So, I mean, I mean, I think it's a great time for somebody like me because at the end of the day, I feel that I am, as somebody that has a creative mind that likes making art. You have a liberal mindset. You are a bit subversive. You want to be innovative. You want to create something new and whatever. And hey, look, making something as traditional as that, like going through the traditional hero's journey story, can be that thing now. It's just funny.
Yeah, that is a pretty funny position to be in, where the most traditional ancient, or one of the most traditional ancient narratives is now somewhat the subversive thing. I wanted to speak about, maybe as we begin to wrap up, one of the key things I've sort of, how do I say this? Like one of the key concerns I personally have, but also have heard echoed when it comes to Christian art in general. And that's sort of like the sticking Jesus too obviously in the story problem, is what I'll call it, for lack of a better term, where the story, instead of embodying the pattern, will try to just shift the font
Yeah,
of the Jesus story. I don't know if you get what I'm if you see what I'm getting
it's
at.
like uh, it's like you're making like a propaganda piece instead of just genuinely
Exactly,
putting out a
exactly.
story
And
or creating art.
it feels kind of icky, because you can enjoy the story, and then you get to that point and you're kind of like, okay, I get it. I'm sympathetic to it, but it
The
kind of,
people
yeah.
the people who enjoy that is the people who enjoy the propaganda, not the people that enjoy the art. The people who enjoy it is like, what is this? But if you see like God's Not Dead, like they make a good amount of money. It was quite popular among evangelical Christians, not among anybody else. It's like which is funny because the idea is like, oh yeah, we're gonna reach the atheists, we're gonna reach these people with this movie. No, how?
Exactly. You're not going to reach them with
How?
that.
It's such an obvious propaganda piece. Like, why would they sit down and watch God's Not Dead? So who is that movie aimed at? It's aimed at Christians who are gonna feel happy that or validated It's such an odd thing. It's not good at all in my opinion. Um, but then again, and I mean, look, I feel that there's space for that kind of stuff to be made and whatever. It's not like I'm gonna reject all of it, but there's a point where you have to make art, you make good art, and there's something about it that is going to reach people. I feel like that's it comes from a place of somebody that doesn't recognize that there's something inherently good about beauty, you know? Because yes, beauty can be, you can hide something bad with beauty and sell it. That is true. But it doesn't mean that beauty is bad or that beauty is neutral, in my opinion. I think beauty is inherently good. That's why it's beautiful, right? I mean, beautiful things are created by God. And so, uh, I think that if you make something beautiful and something that is truthful and genuine, I think that's going to reach people. Uh, that is actually one of the things that connected to orthodoxy at the beginning. To be honest, it's looking at the icons, it's looking at traditional art. And I was like, whoa! Looking at the liturgy, looking at that kind of stuff, I was like, this this is beautiful. So that already captured. Now that wasn't the end of it. I had to explore other things. I had to investigate. But that was what hooked me at first. Um, and so God's not dead is not going to hook people. The people that go, why God's not dead, are already hooked for whatever reason. That's their background. But if you want to hook people, make something beautiful, make something truthful, and you're going to see it. And I feel that intuitively, they're going to be like, this hit me. There's something here that is true, you know, and then the rest is history. Now, there is a dilemma, which is, and this is the dilemma I'm working on, which is, you understand that Christ is at the center of all, like the ultimate symbol. So he's at the center of all symbols are in some way connected to Christ. He's at the center of creation itself, at the center of reality. You know that. You write a story. You're conscious of that, right? How do you avoid doing what Sam Harris says is like smuggling Jesus? Is like you're putting them bam. It's like it's actually this is a propaganda piece all along. You know, um, how do you avoid doing that? Well, I think it's just having a broader understanding of Christ. You know, and if you go, I really like how I was speaking with the guys at Dirt Robbins, and the way that they approach this is that they try to make their art logo centric, right? So it's based on the truth of the logos. That's Christ, right? And so if you do that, if you place things on their proper place, if you do something that is truthful, Christ is there already. The truth is there, you know. So I think that's a way of dealing with it. I don't know. What do you think?
So actually, this is super interesting because the previous interview we talked a lot about beauty, and we talked a little bit about truth too. And so the kind of definition that we were a little bit working with, playing with of beauty was just so something is beautiful when your will can sort of see its place in the whole, right? So things are beautifully arranged when you can see your proper place in
Yeah,
that. So when you're talking about not only,
yeah,
hooking people to the art, well, making beautiful art, well, that's literally it, right? Make art where people will be able to feel themselves fit into that narrative, feel themselves fit into that story. And then that it's very hard to differentiate that from truth, because if that's not true, then what is. So I
yeah,
think I think
yeah,
it links very nicely to what you were saying.
yeah. I guess the only problem is that deception can use truth. Like, like you can
Hmm.
use the truth and then smuggle the lie. Like, bam, now you're confused. Now we kind of got you. So I understand that, but again, like you cannot then be afraid of making something that's truly beautiful. Like if I, uh, you know, David playing the harp, you know, he didn't have to like, and he has some beautiful songs, but just the playing of the harp, had a power to it, So I think that uh, beautiful things, are from God inherently. Now people can take them and misuse them, but yes, I do think of it as a good, not as neutral.
I just realized there's a question I forgot to ask that I really wanted to ask. It's about the latest short film you made, I think, Agranon's Fate.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what's the meaning of the film, because I got to the end and I had a hypothesis, but I wanted to confirm from the creator what are you trying to show with that ending.
Uh, what's your hypothesis?
So
I'm
my
curious about that.
okay, so my hypothesis is very AI influenced because I've been talking about that with a lot of people, and
Cool.
I was thinking, right. So you kind of have the black box, and they're connected to the black box, and the way I was viewing that is you have an alternative world that is real to the artificial intelligences living within the world, but then the exterior force then tries to unplug it and throw it away, and so you start to see the disruptions in the artificial world in a sense. And I thought maybe that was it, but then I realized that was probably way before all this AI stuff. So doubtful that that's the true interpretation, but yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking.
Hey, remember we were talking at the beginning about the grandma who looked at Obi-Wan Kenobi?
That's my
Uh,
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
no, 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 no. Actually, I mean, there is a sense. I mean, it's a short film, and I mean, if I were to make that into a full-length film, I would probably clear up certain things even for myself. It's like I have a theory about how exactly the cube works. But I have a general idea. Yeah, the cube is like some sort of computer or something. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess a part of the way that short film is made, I think the idea is for people to be able to go back and look at it and watch it like 100 times, and be able to have enough pieces and clues for them to watch them, a couple times and keep getting things. Now there is ambiguity on certain things. Yes. So I don't want to just explain the ending,
Yeah, no,
but
don't. I think it's perfect
but
like that. Just leave it there. Give us a couple hints, but leave it open.
yeah, but there's an element of and if you pay attention to the song, it's kind of there in the song as well. It definitely has elements of escapism through virtual reality, and then the end of it. What's the end? Like where does that lead you? You know, I don't know. I don't want to. You know, I feel that that's one that I want people to really dig into.
Yeah, I thought that was the best one, probably also the most recent one. So maybe there's a connection there, but yeah, no, for sure. I
Yeah,
recommend everybody go watch it and try to
there's
pick the pieces.
there is an AI in the there is AI. There's AI. There's all that kind of stuff. All that good stuff. That's bad.
Yeah, I guess I was my intuition was sort of in the right direction then, so that's good. I wasn't too off mark.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm done with my questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
I just wanted to say that AI is scary, and that
Man, my last conversation was all about that. So if you have more to add, go ahead.
I don't know if they have a lot to add, but I just want to panic people. Uh, but Black Eyed Peas, they made a whole album back in when 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 think it was like in 2010 or something like that. They make this whole album based on transhumanism. I remember looking into it, and it's just surreal to me that I'm what they predicted in their album. Like I'm seeing it already. Like I expected that maybe when I was like, if God willing, I make it like old age. I'm like, yeah, maybe not even my generation, maybe a future generation. But it's just been a couple like a decade, and we're already seeing that. They had this song, this music video. I think it's called "I'm a Bee," and in the music video they had like their I think it's their DJ uh, member with this but it's not even, it's like a small laptop computer thingy, and it's saying like, look, we just put couple inputs and they will like make the song for us. It will like, it has your voice, it has your ideas, it will literally be just like any of our songs, but we just put a couple inputs and they're like, but this is messed up, but the idea of the music video is like, yeah, but this is the future, like this is just what's coming.
Yeah.
And they treat it like as kind of like a funny thing and whatever, but I know what they were doing. I feel like they were kind of like signaling, hey, this is coming. And now it's here, and it is truly it's gonna, I feel that this is going to be the probably the biggest, most controversial problem for us in the next, I mean, in the next decade or this decade.
Oh, probably. I have no doubt about that.
Biggest issue. This is gonna be wow. And
Yeah.
obviously, yes, you know, I'm thinking about it like as an artist, how this is gonna change the game. They're gonna very soon. Just I expect in a couple of years, they're gonna be making like full scripts by like an AI. Just put what kind of movie you want, what kind of characters, and AI will be able to make like this very formulaic or maybe even something kind of like avant-garde, you know. And they will put it out, and that's just gonna be something that's gonna compete with the human artist.
Yeah. Hmm. That's a whole other conversation, man. That's a crazy topic.
Yeah,
We should do a part two, diving into the impact of
yeah,
AI on art. I think that'd be
yeah,
fun.
yeah. That'll be fun. I will probably read a little bit more into it, so that I can have something more to share about
All
that.
right, perfect.
I just want to, before ending this, I want to give a shout out to Bastion of Beauties group. It's a group inspired by Jonathan Pageau's Call to Artist, and I'm probably gonna give you a link. See
Yeah.
if you want to plug it in.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it's just an invitation to like-minded artists who want to kind of use art to deal with the meaning crisis and all that kind of stuff. So shout out to them. They've been great. It's been a great experience meeting with them. So yeah.
All right. And where can people find your work? Just plug all your stuff.
Yeah, so I have a channel that I haven't updated in a long time. I think it's called Gaddiel Nieves. I haven't even checked it.
You think it's called?
Well, I'm gonna give you the link, and the link is gonna be there. Now I'm probably gonna update it soon at some point, because right now I'm working on a project that's gonna be like a full length film. Right.
Nice.
So this is a big thing. So I'm probably gonna promote that a little bit and on the channel. So if you want to see a full length film that deals with the topics that we have been discussing today, then maybe that's gonna be interesting for you.
Hey, man, I'm excited. Keep me updated. And if you ever need to put something up on this channel, then you're more than welcome to. We'd be happy to
Oh, cool.
host your stuff here.
Thank you. I'm very grateful.
You're welcome. All right, man. Well, that's it for this interview. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
All right, man. That was fun. How'd you find that?
I don't know. I probably hate it when I watch it, but that's always the case.
The trick, you don't watch it. That's been
You
my
don't
technique.
watch it. I
It's
probably don't watch it.
it's
I'll send it
it's
to my mother. She'll say good things about it.
oh, perfect. Oh, man.
But thank you. I think it's a good initiative. while you're doing the channel. And I mean, I think that if you stay consistent with it, it's gonna grow, and I think it's gonna be a great platform for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I just personally find it cool to talk to people and hear what they have to say. So I'm doing it for the fun of it. But
That's that's the best thing. That's the best thing. That's really the. So if you have that, then you have the best angle to go at it. That's how channels usually grow. If you that's why my channel is unsuccessful. I mean, I like posting, but I don't like posting too much. So I
mm,
haven't found an angle in which like I want to post like every week. So I post when I have an idea and like, oh, maybe I'm gonna make this video and I post it, and I don't post then for like 3 months or so.
oh, okay,
So, but if you like doing it, if you like making these videos and you do with them very often, like weekly or something, then it will grow. Even if that's not your goal, it will happen. It's gonna be a good thing. People that try to post weekly or something like that, and that they don't fully enjoy it, or it's like a genuine thing, they're just trying to make a business or whatever. It's harder for them. That's just what I see. So yeah, it's a great angle.
hey man, thank you for the words of encouragement. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, well either I'll reach out or you reach out whenever you read up some more about AI stuff, because I think that conversation about AI art could be really interesting. Maybe bring in Moses
Yes.
too, because I think he has some strong takes on AI and art. So maybe Moses will be able to join us for that one too. That one could be nice.
Yes. Yeah, and I can. I think there's. It would be nice to have like a small panel.
Yeah,
I have a friend who also like Orthodox filmmaker who is actually helping me in the project that I was talking about, the full length film, and he has some really cool ideas as well. So maybe we could do like a small
nice.
panel there.
All right,
Yeah.
that'd be perfect. Okay, I'm noting that down, and thank you, man, for doing this again. And I'll see you next
Yeah.
time.
No problem. All right. Thank you.
All right, bye bye.
Yeah.